Okay,
so we're shaming
here's-
RB2s now. That's what we're doing. Got it. Okay.
I don't think
Wes,
this is
there's a
RB2.
reason it's a list. There can't be 40 top 10 wide receivers or running backs. What's up? Welcome back to 4th Control Fantasy, the most entertaining fantasy football podcast on the planet. I'm Noah Selby.
I'm Wes Selby.
And I'm not talking to you right now, dude, because it's the debate episode.
Don't look at me right now.
Get out of here.
Stop it. I don't know what you're about to say, but you're wrong. Look at him. Look at him. He's got a hand for a head.
Don't even look
Embarrassing.
At me. I don't even want to look at you.
Look like a thumb from Spy Kids.
That's right. That's right. We're back with another episode of We're back with another episode of 4th Control Fantasy, and clearly this is such a high stakes episode, as you all can tell. We are having some fantasy football debates today. It's going to be a fun time. We are going to be convincing each other on some certain players that I'm high on. Wes might not be high on. Wes is high on. I'm not high on. We're going to talk about them. We're going to debate. It's going to be a fun time. We're going to try to convince each other as to why they should draft this player. It's going to be a blast. Before we do it, make sure you're following us on all our socials. They're all linked down below in the description, in the bio. Make sure you like, subscribe, ring the bell, and comment which player you are having the hardest time deciding if you're going to draft. Maybe we'll come back to this or reply in some comments and make some social media stuff about it, just so we can keep the debates going. It's going to be a fun time. Make sure you check out nice, dude.
Thanks.
Delayed reaction. I couldn't tell why I stumbled over my words, and then I remembered you just let out a beautiful
I'm already trying to throw you off.
It's mind games. Damn it.
How are you going to get to any of your points?
I'm so screwed.
Guy.
Oh my gosh. Listen, make sure you check out everything we got down below. We got our Discord with our weekly rankings. We were giving away a signed James Cook jersey this season, and we are going to be doing some custom merch. That's all through our Patreon, which is going to be in the link down below. Make sure you go check that out. It's going to be a blast. Let's get into it, Wes. I'm excited. Okay. Let's do it.
You're up
it's
first.
Gonna be a fun time. Like I said, but Wes and I are gonna try and convince each other on some players that throughout the offseason so far, we've got a bit of a grasp that the other person may not be super high on. They're not super stoked on, and they may not even be able to ever think they will be able to be convinced to draft said player. We're gonna do our best to convince the other of that.
Okay.
Maybe a fair fight.
Dude, may the best arguer win. Yeah. I went to debate. I had debate class in high school, so get ready for me to talk about strawman fallacy.
I'm just gonna scream. If that's fair.
Slippery slopes.
Yeah. All right. Cool. All right. First one. Let's jump into it, Wes. Throughout this offseason, you've expressed some displeasure, some lack of confidence, some doubt, one might say, and a tight end over there in Maryland by the name of Mark Andrews. Now I'm going to tell you, dude, just draft him. I promise. Listen, just draft him because it's going to be worth it. Mark Andrews last season missed 7 games. Played in what's the opposite of that? Let me do math real quick.
I'm not helping you. I'm not helping you at all. This is all your case.
Mark Andrews missed 7 games last season. He was still the tight end 15, and he missed 7 games. Not necessarily anything crazy, but to be the tight end 15, to not be outside the top 32 when it comes to the tight end position when you miss half the season, worth noting. He averaged 14.5 fantasy points per game when he was healthy last season from weeks 2 through 10, and that's a 17-game pace of 247.6 fantasy points. He would have been the tight end 1 with that output. Here's just a little silly fact for you, Wes. He was the tight end 26 with 4.3 points in week 11, and he only played 7 snaps in that game. Now listen, tight end 26 doesn't really do anything for you, but to be the tight end 26 and you played 7 offensive snaps in a football game, and that's it, that's how big a part of Mark this offense Mark Andrews is. I don't know, Wes. I don't know. I think. Let me know. What do you think? Have I convinced you? Have I convinced you or given a case enough for Mark Andrews to be in?
So first of all, the offense that Lamar Jackson loves is through Mark Andrews. Let me just clarify. I think Isaiah Likely is the reason Mark Andrews is out of the top 5. And I think he may be borderline. He's borderline top 10 to me. Mark Andrews is. I think he's good enough to be top 10, but I do think that Isaiah Likely he's the reason that I think he's going to end up falling out of the top 5 and maybe not even making top 10, especially with the addition of Derrick Henry. If Henry ends up being the red zone monster that people suspect him to be, with all the talk about how Gus Edwards was great in the red zone and 13 rushing touchdowns off of like 40 rushing yards, that's where my hesitation is for Mark Andrews. That's why that's why I'm disagreeing with you.
Okay. So you saw the production that Isaiah Likely had last season when Mark Andrews went down, and even a little bit when he was still playing. And you think, listen, if we see a full season of that, there's going to be some decline in the production and the output. So that's where you're at.
Yes.
What if I told you, Wes? What if I told you that in 2022, when Mark Andrews finished as the tight end 4 and just 14 games played, I'll add, Isaiah Likely actually had more targets in 2022 than he did in 2023, with Mark Andrews not playing half the season. Isaiah Likely in 2022 had 60 targets that season. Really solid output, really solid target numbers for a tight end. Yeah. But last season, when he was the main guy for truly half the season, when Mark Andrews was out, he only had 40 targets in 2023. And he finished as the tight end 25, playing half the season, full tight end 1 for the team. In 2022, with those 60 targets with the higher involvement, he was the tight end 27 that season, fully involved. Are we? Does that convince you any more? Perhaps.
I'm curious to know where Isaiah Likely finished points per game in that 2022 season. 2022. You're talking about him having more targets.
Let's see.
Or if you could even just kind of look a little bit at what he did in some of the games without Mark Andrews.
Yeah, I'll pull up his game log for 2023 or 2022 when he was more heavily involved.
Do 2022 when he was first showing up.
Okay.
There with Baltimore and was impressing people.
When he had 60 targets in his rookie season.
I'm asking for that. You keep looking, but I'm asking for that because last year Likely was involved because Andrew got hurt, where in 2022 he was involved with Andrew, only missing about 3 games. So that's why that'll be the most interesting case for me, because I guess then we need to. We're not going to take too much time on each player. We only have 3 more left, but I do wonder, could Lamar Jackson produce 2 top 15 tight ends?
That'd be interesting. That'd be interesting for sure. So you want to know the fantasy points or the targets or
fantasy points per game?
Fantasy points per game. So I'll run through here real quick. I mean, he played 16 games. I'll look at the total output there. 91.3 fantasy points. 16. So he was at 5.7 fantasy points per game in 2022. So he was looking at, he had a couple spike weeks. The week 18 where, it doesn't count for fantasy was a big week for him. He had 18.3 fantasy points.
I do remember that. He had 2 touchdowns, right?
Let's see. I don't see touchdowns. He did have 8 receptions for 103 yards. I will note that he played 88% of the snaps that game. So that was Mark Andrews was resting, sitting out for the playoffs. But I don't know. Have I done enough?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. You have. I will say, because I was thinking that it was going to be one or the other. And you're showing me that it looks like Andrew, Likely can still have some pretty good games, even with Andrews back. And I've been reading some stuff in Baltimore about the camp and that Andrews is already just right back to where he was as the favorite target. So okay,
Sure. All right.
all right, I'll give it to you.
Convince me, Wes. Convince me. It's your turn.
Okay, so I believe it was it last episode? Khalil Shakir. We talked about the
The
Buffalo
diamonds and the
Bills.
reachers.
Yes, we talked about
Mhm.
he was the one I'm reaching on. And I
Mhm.
said Khalil Shakir has top 15 upside. And you said you think it's Curtis Samuel is the better Bills wide receiver to take.
The wide
So
receiver to draft. Yeah, was my
wide receiver
output or
draft.
my
Okay,
outlook.
so
Mhm.
let me just say I Dalton Kincaid is still, I believe, the primary
Absolutely.
target for Josh Allen, and I still believe that Shakir can end up as top 15. Now,
Wow.
I have a couple of things, and it sounds crazy, but like it happens all the time. I mean, like look
Yeah.
at DJ Moore and Cole
Absolutely.
Kmet last year. That was both top 10. So, um, first of all, right now, Shakir. I'm trying to convince you why Shakir is the better Bills wide receiver to draft. First of all, Shakir is listed as first on the depth chart. He's right now the number one wide receiver for Buffalo. Number two, he is one of the highest graded wide receivers in PFF for separation in yards per route. So he is among the top with Brandon Ayuk and Tyreek Hill, as someone that can, as a route runner, as one of the best route runners in the NFL of a minimum of 200 routes. So just a little bit of like it's not just that he it's not like Josh Palmer. No disrespect to Palmer, he might be a sleeper candidate, but like Josh Palmer is now the number one because everyone else left. But Shakir actually is a good route runner wide receiver. He's also the only wide receiver that played with Josh Allen last year. So there's that rapport that has already been established.
Sure.
And once Joe Brady took over, is when Shakir started to make a name for himself, enough to kind of scare Stephon Diggs owners in fantasy last year. And Joe Brady is now going to continue to be the offensive coordinator for the Bills. And Allen threw 2 touchdowns, one in each playoff game in against the Steelers and the Chiefs. And I mentioned that last episode. And so there's already a trust and there's already a dependency in important game situations. The Steelers was not as close, but he threw to Shakir on that pass where Chris Jones knocked the lineman back into Josh Allen and he underthrew Shakir. That was Shakir. That was wide open and ready for the game-winning touchdown before they missed wide right again. He's also
Mhm.
24 years old, going to his third year. He's very young, very talented. He's usually wide receivers start to hit their spikes. So that is why I think Shakir is the much, much better option than Curtis Samuel and Keon Coleman, because rookie wide receivers don't really do much unless they are the clear number one wide receiver like Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Puka Nacua for a long time last year and continued to be great. And Curtis Samuel is going to be 29 in his 9th year, I believe. He's old, he's bounced around, and he's kind of a journeyman wide receiver. So that's my case. How do you feel? I mean, that's what, no, not how do you feel? You're right, Wes. That's what I say. That's what I think you say.
Well, you've laid
Shakir.
out some fantastic arguments. You have. I assure you. Excuse me. And let me be the first to say, I like Khalil Shakir. You can go back in our episodes from last season when he was kind of showing up, getting some more targets in the offense, that kind of thing. We both talked about it. We both said, I think this guy's interesting. He's going to be somebody to watch. As soon as we saw Stephon Diggs leave the team, as soon as we saw Gabe Davis leave the team, we both went, all right. I mean, it might be time for Khalil Shakir. I mean, it
Yeah.
really is opening up an opportunity for him. What round is he going in? What's his ADP? Do you have
He's
that?
the 13th round.
It's going to the 13th round. Okay, so I again, truly, I like Khalil Shakir. Here's my argument for it, and here's and for not drafting Khalil Shakir is that Curtis Samuel goes like a round ahead of him. I believe they are. I wrote it down. I looked at it today in Sleeper. Um, they're going 7 picks apart. We're currently in the ADP, and in my brain, I've looked at. I'm more willing to. I think Khalil Shakir may be the exciting, potentially the ceiling pick maybe to pick here because he could be the second highest target earner. That was very solid information you gave, that he creates separation. He earns targets that way.
Yeah.
He may be the more exciting pick to make. However, I think I'm still going to stick with Curtis Samuel when it comes down to it. Curtis Samuel's
But
played with Joe
why?
Brady before. I'll tell you, Curtis Samuel has played with Joe Brady before in Carolina. And in 2020, when Curtis Samuel had his best season as a wide receiver for fantasy football, and he was the wide receiver 25, as the third best wide receiver for a football team on his team. He had two 1,000-yard wide receivers ahead of him. Now, that means there's a real chance that Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel are legitimate because he did that with Teddy Bridgewater. He was the wide receiver 25. And then there was DJ Moore ahead of him, and there was Chosen Anderson or Robbie Chosen or Chosen or Anderson or
Snoop
Anderson,
Lion.
whatever he ended up being. Now, there is a real chance that Khalil and Curtis Samuel could both be guys. But if I'm making the pick and it's not a big price difference, I'm gonna play it a little safer, I think. And I'm gonna go with the guy that I've seen be fantasy productive in a season-long format before. So I'll still ride with Khalil, or I'll still ride with Curtis Samuel.
Safe in the 13th round. What risk do you have in the 13th round where you're gonna take the trusted option?
In what other season have we seen a guy who's been a top 25 wide receiver going in the 13th round before with Teddy Bridgewater as his quarterback? And now we links up with Josh Allen and Joe Brady.
And I think Shakir is a top 15.
I understand that PFF has given him a great separation rating. I also want to take a look that he hasn't really, like, beyond like 3 games last season. He was involved in the playoffs. So I'll give him that. He caught 2 touchdowns in the playoffs and a touchdown in each game. But I prefer drafting the guy who I've seen do it before in a season-long format. So it'll be a fun one to monitor throughout this season for us to be able to keep our eyes on this Bills backfield or this Bills wide receiver room.
We'll take them each in a league we're in together. You're taking Samuel and I'm taking Shakir. I'm obviously taking Shakir before you take Samuel, but all right.
I draft both. I just take both.
I'll throw you out a window. I'll push you down a flight of stairs. I'm not even kidding.
I don't want to talk about another wide receiver here. I want to talk about another wide receiver here. I'm going to hold you to it. I'm going to make you do it. Listen, we've talked already this offseason, about there's not going to be much good going on in a beautiful town in Ohio called Cleveland. There's not going to be too much pretty stuff going on because Deshaun Watson is the quarterback. Now, Deshaun Watson looked bad last season. I have my concerns. But quite literally, the only thing that looked good when Deshaun Watson was playing quarterback was his top wide receiver, Amari Cooper. It's a small sample, but in his 5 games with Deshaun Watson last season, he averaged 17.6 fantasy points per game. That was a 17-game pace of, let me make sure I read this correctly, a 17-game pace of 132 targets, 95 catches, 1,632 yards, and 7 touchdowns. He would have been the wide receiver 4 last season on that pace. I get it. I do. Deshaun did not look good. But I believe Amari Cooper is a very strong wide receiver 2 option that sweats, bleeds, pees, and pukes wide receiver 1 upside. And he's going as the wide receiver 30, all at the same time, by the way, just to give that visual to everybody.
Yeah.
just all the upside, just exuding from everywhere that he can.
He's so dedicated.
Yeah. I think he's such a strong wide receiver too, with fantastic wide receiver 1 upside. We all saw what he did with Joe Flacco. I know it's Flacco. I get it. But he had an insane game, broke records. It was unbelievable. He's the clear top target for the team. I know there's some potential contract disputes going on. I'm not worried. The latest report is that they're going to work things out to get it done before the season starts, hopefully before camp starts. I'm not worried about it. Here's my biggest factor, is that I don't think they're going to have a 100% Nick Chubb. I don't think they're going to. And who has been the lifeblood of this offense but Nick Chubb over the years? I don't think they're going to be able to ground and pound the same way they have. I think Amari Cooper is going to be a big, big, big role, a big, big, big player, and a big, big, big contributor in this offense. I'm loving drafting Amari Cooper. He's going as the wide receiver 30 in he's going like the 6th round. Like it's fantastic. It's fantastic. And I think it's definitely somebody that people should be drafting. Wes, I think you should be drafting him, except for not in leagues we're together, please.
All right. So how do we gauge this? Are we gauging this based on how well he does with Deshaun Watson or how he does on the season?
I mean, I think he'll. Are you talking about last season or this upcoming season?
This upcoming season, like how do I know that you're right in the end? Is it because of how good he does with Watson, or was he a good draft pick?
Ideally, I believe that my hope is that Deshaun Watson is the quarterback for the whole season. I believe that's the Browns' hope as well, and I think that because that's my hope and my thought process and what I'm visualizing when I'm arguing this, when I'm giving this argument for Amari Cooper, I think it's I'll say, listen, if Watson goes down, I'm not going to stand here and say Amari Cooper isn't talented unless it's with Deshaun Watson. I really like Amari Cooper. He's a great football player. But I'll say, I think with Deshaun Watson, he has the very strong case of being. I believe I have him as a top 16 wide receiver this season.
Okay,
and I think he has a very strong chance to do better than that.
Because here's what I'll say: I think Amari Cooper will be better without Watson this season. That's where I stand. But do I think that Cooper is a good draft pick? Absolutely. But I do not think it is because of Deshaun Watson.
So in your brain, you're visualizing Watson gets hurt, Watson maybe gets benched, and Jameis Winston comes in. And man, I love when Jameis Winston comes out, dude. When Jameis Winston steps in, and eat a W, dude. Come on.
Just hear that carefully. When Jameis Winston is the starter for the Browns. When he's the starter this year. Yeah, Amari Cooper is going to be a nightmare. But with Watson, I have some concerns. I have some concerns because it's been so long since he's actually played even, I don't know, 6 full games in a season. It's been 2 full NFL seasons since he's played like 7 games or something like that.
Finish. So very fair.
Not. There's so much time has passed that I have so much concern about Watson himself. But as far as Cooper, and I mean maybe Jerry Jeudy actually ends up being a decent wide receiver.
Yeah, we'll see.
But so I mean, I'm not gonna give it to you just because of the Watson point. But if you're drafting Amari Cooper, I'm gonna say like, that's a solid choice. That's gonna end because of his ADP. But if you're gonna tell me Watson's playing every game week 1 through week 17 fantasy, and Amari Cooper's gonna be top 15, I'm gonna push back on that.
Push back on that. All right, deal.
Let's watch it.
Let's see how it goes. I like it.
Okay. Here's the last one. That we're debating this offseason. You hate this guy for absolutely no reason. You haven't even really given point. You gave 1 point last episode. You don't like Josh Jacobs whatsoever. You do not like Josh Jacobs, and he's now in Green Bay, and he's replaced Aaron Jones, and you said something. You remember at the top of your head? Do you have this available? How many rushing yards per game you saw last year with Josh Jacobs? That's the one thing. That's the one point you've made about Jacobs, other than
the rushing yards per game.
Yeah, you brought it up last episode. That's the one thing you've said that actually made sense. Everything else was just like, I hate the guy. I'm taking 20 running backs over him. It was just an emotional. Yeah. So find this real quick.
I'll pull it up. You give me your points. I'm listening.
Okay, because I wanted to get that because last year was not a good season for the Raiders whatsoever. First of all, first year with Jimmy Garoppolo, first and last year with Jimmy Garoppolo, and he was terrible. He was awful. He got benched. So Josh Jacobs' quarterback got benched. His coach got fired halfway through the season, and then he missed games due to injury. So I think that's all that contributed to a pretty poor season for Josh Jacobs. And don't forget, you and I predicted this, not those exact happenings, but he was the rushing title the year before. You and I said, watch out. It's not a consistent thing in the NFL for fantasy. But
Yeah.
let's remember, he's now just 1 year removed from the rushing title. So
Right.
he's still very good, and he's been top 10 multiple times in fantasy.
Right.
And since he's been in the NFL, he is second in rushing yards. 2019. Since 2019, he is second in rushing yards, second in rushing touchdowns, and second in rushing attempts, all behind Derrick Henry. He is second in yards, touchdowns, and attempts, and he is actually fifth in rushing yards per game in the NFL, behind arguably the four best running backs in the NFL: Derrick Henry, then Nick Chubb, then Jonathan Taylor, and Christian McCaffrey, who is fourth, actually. So I think Jacobs going over to Green Bay is a solid option as a top 10 candidate because of what he has produced.
Well,
Last year, I think, was totally plausible for him to have a down season. It's not consistent for running backs. So for you to say that there are at least 15 running backs you'd rather take is why I want to give you some information about Jacobs. He's sent over to a young offense, a good team. Matt LaFleur is a good coach. There's a lot going for him. And also, just historically, he's bound to make top 10 again. That is a
sure.
historical stat. If you want to get into the minutia of what that stat is, 24-year-olds in their fourth year in the top 10 make top 10 again at some point in their career. And I think that happens this year. I think he's a top 10 candidate. So have I persuaded you to at least consider him in this
You
third
have
round?
you've given good information here, and it rings true. He does. He has a track record. He has been a top 12. He came in his rookie season, wasn't great. He was the PPR running back 21. They had 3 straight years being a top 12 fantasy running back. Like it is. It's fair. It's fair to acknowledge. It's
Yeah.
fair to point out. I believe the stat that I gave last episode was that he had the lowest yards per carry of any running back with over 200 rushing attempts last season.
Okay.
I believe that was what I had given. He was running at 3.5 yards a carry. It was a career low in efficiency. That could be because he was holding out. He wasn't really training with the team in the offseason. Maybe wasn't fully on top of it as far as his best shape of his life that he could be to be playing. I will say, here's where I have Josh Jacobs this season. I think he's an RB2. I think he's a back end RB2. I think there's about 20 guys that I think will finish better than him. Here's why. And I'm calling my shot a little bit here. And we talked about it last episode. I do believe that rookie Marshawn Lloyd is a real threat to take away opportunities, that he's not just a backup. He's getting a lot of praise out of camp. Obviously, I bet the response right now is going to be, what rookie isn't getting a lot of praise out of camp? Keon Coleman. That's who's not getting a lot of praise out of camp. It happens.
They drive Khalil Shakir.
It's Keon. Guy, take it easy. I gave my case for Curtis Samuel. All right. I believe Marshawn Lloyd is a real threat to take opportunities. I pointed out last episode that it's always been a tandem for Green Bay in the backfield. They've always had two guys in there. They always try to run out, not a full committee, but they usually have two guys that they stick with. Here's my biggest thing with Josh Jacobs is that I do believe that they brought him in on the contract, the 4-year, I believe it's 4-year, 34, 40 million, something like that. I took a look at the contract, and they can be out of his contract for just like $9 million of dead cap after 1 year. They can be out. The initial bigger numbers may have been a little deceiving. It leads me to believe they're not maybe fully committed, and they spent day 2 capital on a running back in Marshawn Lloyd. So you have convinced me. I'm probably going to move Josh Jacobs up in my rankings a little bit because it's fair. He has been so efficient, or not so efficient, but so effective. And when it comes to leading a backfield, he's a pure workhorse. I in Vegas, and I do believe that I don't think he's not talented. I just think he's not as strong. He's not a strong RB2 for me. I believe there's going to be about 18 to 20 guys that are probably going to finish better than him this season. That's where I'm at on Josh Jacobs. You have convinced me. I am going to move him up. You've made good points, but I'm still not fully
Okay.
bought in. Probably because I've got a man crush on Marshawn Lloyd.
Two things. One, I think you're way too high on Marshawn Lloyd. This is.
I don't think
this
you're
is
at
the
liberty to talk about Marshawn Lloyd because last episode
This
you
is-
told me you're just following my lead on Marshawn Lloyd.
I think I know, but I've looked into it more, and I think this is a Tank Bigsby of last year, where you have some guy that's rookie that's like pushing in for the Travis Etienne and make concern, and then Etienne ended up being a top 3 running back. So, well, AJ Dillon was never relevant in Green Bay to the point where
I disagree.
he was
I was starting
never.
AJ Dillon a couple of years ago.
How'd that turn out for you? Where
I
did
mean,
that lead your team?
he was the RB23 and the RB26 last
There you go.
2 years before.
Back up, nearly top 20.
Okay, so we're shaming RB2s now. That's what we're doing. Got it. Okay.
I don't think Jacobs is an
There's
RB2.
a reason it's a list. There can't be 40 top 10 wide receivers or running backs.
Exactly, and I think Jacobs is this point. Can you give me? I know we've got our rankings like later on, so this is not official. But right now, just can you show out of the top 10? Can you just show me? Can you just name some of the running backs you're feeling that are going to do better in fantasy than Josh Jacobs? I'm not holding you to it. This is unofficial, but I just want to know.
So if I want to be sure that I'm catching on here, that I'm making sure I'm hearing your argument. Are you saying Josh Jacobs is a top 10 running back this season?
I believe so. I believe he has the upside of top 10.
So at the back of my my top 10 here, I've got Isaiah Pacheco, I've got Jonathan Taylor, I've got Devon Achane. I believe those are all guys that it's fair to have above of
those
Josh
are reasonable.
Jacobs.
Yeah.
After them, I've got Derrick Henry, I've got James Cook, I've got Travis Etienne, I've got Alvin Kamara, I've got James Conner, I've got Joe Mixon, I've got Ramondre Stevenson, Kenneth Walker III, Zach Moss.
You have Ramondre Stevenson over Josh Jacobs in your rankings right now?
I do. They just gave him a bunch of money.
And they just gave Josh Jacobs a bunch of money.
A bunch of money that they can burn $9 million on next season, and they don't have to do anything about it.
Oh, my goodness. An ETN
we'll see.
Over Jacobs. Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to our top 10 rankings for running backs in a couple of weeks.
We'll see.
There'll be some fun. Differences in that.
I'm excited to look at it. Listen, that's going to do it for the episode. We are going to go ahead and listen. Maybe we'll do this again, Wes. Maybe we'll do another debate episode before the season begins. It'll be fun.
It's funny because these are like the only 4 players we like aren't totally.
We've looked at it. It's a little tough.
We're usually in sync. We're bye on all this.
Yeah.
These are the only 4 so far.
Listen, let us know who you agree with here on this debate episode. Drop it in the comments. It's definitely me. I know it's definitely my takes for sure.
Yeah, let's see those
not
comments.
That dude over there. Not that dude. What are we doing?
Come on. I have Yoshi right here. You can't disagree with the guy with Yoshi.
I didn't say Yoshi. I said you,
Ratchet
dude. Come on.
and Clank. They're on my side. They're on my side. That's
make
great.
sure to throw a smile by liking, subscribing, ringing the bell. Follow us on all our socials. Jump over to our Patreon. Check out how you can be more involved with us this season. We will go ahead and catch you next time with another fire episode. It's going to be a good time. My name is Noah Selby.
And I'm Wes Selby.
And this has been 4th and Troll Fantasy. 4th and Troll Fantasy is a production of FQ Media Group and Selby Artistic Workshop.